here is the work is never going to be done, but it's important work and we'll continue at it. So I think maybe you introduced my colleagues, Lisa Braun and Julie Weller, prior to starting. So we'll jump right in. This is the beginning of year 5 for us. We started our journey back in 2018, and regardless of COVID, we've come a very long way. Oops. So our philosophy has really, and not just our philosophy, our objective, our goal has really streamlined. And when I say our goal, I'm talking about our entire district. I'm referring to our entire administrative team, our coaching team. I'm referring to our interventionists and even our school board. Our school board is very much involved in this process. So it really came down to the idea that knowledge keeps changing and we have access to that knowledge, and we want to be effective, equitable, and evidence-based for all of our kids. So we have to consistently reassess how we can increase our capacity. It's our job to support our teachers and staff to meet the evolving needs of a diverse population of students. And really our focus is to improve the growth of all students, not just subpopulations. We are looking at all students. All means all, and that's really been our mantra in this work. And I feel pretty confident that the majority of our organization believes that as well, and that's critical to the work that we do. So we are DC Everest. We typically have a population right around below 6,000 students. We're considered suburban. Our area has a varied background of people. We're very rich in manufacturing here, although we have several healthcare facilities, hospitals. So we have 5 elementary schools, actually 6. 2 of them are Title I, and 1 is targeted title. We do have 1 school that is considered to be a magnet school for our challenge or our gifted and talented program. So as I had mentioned, we started back in the fall of 2018, and it's really interesting. Lisa, Julie, and I were all brand new to these positions. We all but we were hired into positions that were very much at a district level. And that's really what afforded us the opportunity to really look through things from a district viewpoint and really get it up in front of the rest of our administrators and our school board. And if you look at our past data, if you look at our school report card, our accountability report card for Wisconsin, we always look pretty good. If you look at the last several years, and that's all public data, you can see that overall our district, all of our schools together, we typically exceed expectations by the state. But as you dig deeper, it's not all kids. So our historical data shows, yep, we look good on paper, but then you start looking at, did we move all kids? Did we move our special ed kids? Did we move our EL kids? Did we move our SES kids? And the answer is no, we didn't. So we didn't want to ignore the data because again, it comes back to all students means all students, not just our students who are on that AP track, not just our students who are college bound, it means all students. And that's where we came up with a 5-year strategic literacy plan. And despite COVID, I think we're even a little bit further maybe than we thought we would get. So it's been pretty empowering. And as I mentioned, we really did have to get all stakeholders on board. So here's just a snapshot of the data. This is a school report card from one of our title schools. This was back in 2018-19 when we were just really starting the work at the administrative level, really trying to get everybody to buy into why we had to do something differently. And this just was kind of like, this cemented it. When our upper admin saw this, when the school saw this, it was really shocking and disappointing. You can see we met few expectations, and you can see that the data, we're not even close to the state averages. Like I said, our entire district isn't a title school, so this is really unacceptable for us. And I think the biggest shocker for some of our teachers was the fact that they were doing the work that they had been asked to do. They were using the curricula that the district had purchased for them, yet these were the outcomes. And then conversely, this is our challenge target school. And you can see, well, it looks really great. 2018, they exceeded expectations. But then as you look closer, you can see our proficiency for our, get this a little smaller here, Our proficiency for our advanced students was well above state average, or not, I'm sorry, proficiency, our performance scores. But then you look at growth of all kids, this isn't acceptable. How can the school that exceeds expectations be this far below the state average? So it really began with getting everybody to look closer at the data. We hadn't really been a strong school at looking at data prior. We used STAR, but we only used STAR K through 8. We didn't have a lot of other data points for people to look at. And so we really started to dig deeper to look beyond what, just the general outcomes were, because again, this is just a population of students who are pushing this score up. Well, why is that not doing? Okay, so how did we shift the thinking? We really focused on the idea that all means all, and we started with the focus of improving our outcomes, improving the experience at Tier 1. We were a school, we were elementary schools that were using levels of reading, which obviously we know that's the MACU effect. If we always tell a student that they're 3 grade levels before and we never let them have access to the text at the grade level, that gap is going to get larger and larger and larger. And obviously we have limited resources. So our team really looked at, okay, let's go down to kindergarten, let's go down to 4K, let's go down to 1st grade, let's get it right there, let's put the resources there, and then slowly move up the trajectory. Because even though we were having students at 8th grade who were reading at a 3rd, 2nd grade level, how do you fix that if you can't fix the root cause at pre-K, K1, 2? So we've really been working hard on Tier 1, that universal classroom, but at the same time, we've also made incredible changes, incredible shifts at Tier 2 and Tier 3. And my counterparts will talk about that in just a little bit. Oh, I'm not sure why that's not changing. There it goes. So we've kind of followed the, well, not kind of, but we have followed the idea of implementation science, where it's ongoing. It's really that continuous improvement. I mentioned at the beginning that the work is never done. All students means all students, and students aren't widgets. They come to us with varied backgrounds. We know now they come to us with a lot of trauma. There's the trauma that the pandemic incurred. So this is ongoing, but we really started down here with our leadership team, because if we don't have our leadership team on board, how do we get the teachers that they supervise, that they work with, on board? So the whole first year, wasn't a whole lot of work with our classroom teachers. We tried to empower those teachers who were on board with us. That would have been someone like Donna back in the day, who we would have started to have those teachers start to do some exploration with some of those evidence-based products, interventions. But we really focused our time on getting our leadership team to understand why we had to do this. Because again, that report card looks like, oh, we're exceeding expectations. Why do we need to change? So that whole first year, I can't remember how many presentations we did, but it was a lot. And we were very lucky. Our superintendent was on board, our 2 assistant superintendents, and then our district leadership team. We really got them to all understand first. We brought a lot of data. We brought a lot of national data. We brought NAEP scores. We brought the research behind pipeline to prison. And we really showed them this is why literacy is at the heart of everything. And our old board goal was the same. It was a focus on 3rd grade literacy proficiency, not seeing the bigger picture that, well, there's literacy in everything. If you're going to be college, career, workplace ready, you need to be literate when you walk into your career technical college courses. So that's really changed, where literacy is at the heart of everything we're doing. Once we got our leadership team on board, and we really started again with, how do we do this so it doesn't feel overwhelming? What's a strategic, logical way to move ahead? We started with pre-K, K1, 2, and we started with letters training. We went around to every possible PLC at every grade level. Some were very open, some understood the need right away and they welcomed it. And we had a lot of people who were resistant to the change. So it was a lot of work of really selling the why first. And I want to say we really spent a whole year selling the why at all levels. We presented to the school board. Once we got the why across, then that's where we really started looking at, okay, data, what are we going to do at K1, 2? What are we going to do for K? And we really looked at a systems approach. Then we brought in our coaches. We had to get them on board, which in itself, you would think that's got to be an easy task, but it wasn't. When you have a group of leadership teachers who they had gone to college, they had gone to graduate school, and they hadn't been taught anything in the science of reading or structured literacy, that's a pretty big philosophical change to ask of someone. We are blessed with an incredible coaching team, and they're in the trenches doing the work now. But we even had to get some of those individuals on board because it took time for them to see, okay, this is what we were taught priorly, but now we have this information that's available. When we know better, we do better. So again, ongoing, we had to decide, where do we have money? Where can we make some of the changes with the curricular products we have in place? So it's been very integrated and ongoing, and it continues. Probably many of you have seen this image before, the change process. A lot of us started, or a lot of our leadership team even started here. We had some resistance even from our own leaders. When you have always been taught something is the correct way of doing it, and then someone, like a group of 3 people, come in and say, wait a minute, not that you're doing it wrong, but we know this, so, and these are the outcomes, so we have to look at this. We got a lot of resistance at first, which is very normal when you make major change, but it's extremely normal when you make a change to someone's philosophical values. So we had a lot of resistance at first, although we did have some people who were way over here when we first started. And we really capitalized on these individuals to help us push forward. We were a team. So those people consisted of some of our administrators. In fact, one of our elementary principals is a former literacy teacher. That person understood right away the why behind, and so we wanted to empower that person's voice to help us move forward. We had several teachers who they were waiting for this to happen, kind of to Donna's point in the beginning, that, you know, years and years ago they were waiting for this to happen and it wasn't happening, so they were super excited. So we had a lot of momentum over here. I'm not going to lie, these individuals, we spent a lot of time, we kept going back to the why. Here's the why, here's the why, here's the why. Right now, I would say when we talk about our pre-K 5 population of teachers, and that's right around 160 teachers, give or take, the majority of us are somewhere over here, which is pretty empowering considering we had to go through COVID. Do we still have people here? Absolutely. That's why we have our 5 literacy coaches working very specifically with those PLCs. And I'm not going to lie to you, we have some people, even though they've known it's been coming for several years, they're still here. The interesting thing is, out of those 160 plus teachers, that's probably less than 5%. If we know those teachers by name, and we're working very closely with them to support them to move them along that trajectory. Our board is 100% on board. Lisa and I have probably presented a dozen times to them. I think sometimes they might get a little sick of us, and it's our turn again to show the data. But I have to compliment them. They've been 100% on board supporting us. We couldn't have done this work without their support. Again, the shift cost us a lot of money in terms of teacher FTE, in terms of, you know, getting rid of all of these curricular resources that hadn't honestly been that old to be replaced with new. So we're very lucky to have had the support that we continue to have with our board. This little graphic are our revised school board goals. Remember, I had mentioned that the old goal was literacy on trajectory for proficiency at 3rd grade. That goal is gone because we believe that it wasn't encompassing of the job of literacy of all teachers, the job of literacy at high school, the job of literacy in the grade levels that aren't being tested. So right now, our goal for literacy is to develop young readers, thinkers, and problem solvers, ensure that each elementary student meets or exceeds expected literacy and math growth. And that's really our definition of on track to be a portrait of a graduate or college career workplace ready. And then that goes right into our secondary portrait of a graduate, because if you're literacy ready, then you're ready to take on this. which reads develop pathways that connect DC Everest students with the world, provide opportunities for every DCE student to be a graduate with meaningful academic, service, and community-based experiences. So again, everybody in our district, all our leaders know about these goals, and at the heart of it is literacy. So these are ongoing 5-year goals. Every year in the last couple of years, literacy has been at the heart of it. We have a district level, and then it goes to us as directors. So what Julie does with special ed, Lisa is key to this with our RTI process. We have a set of goal of what we expect on our screener. Then the school level principals each write their goal to help us get to these goals. Department levels are expected to do so. And then it actually even happens at the PLC and classroom level. And we keep it front and center. We are constantly, I sometimes I feel like we have been the crusaders for the last 4 years of, if anybody knows what we do, they know we do literacy, although we all have other jobs in addition. We report up to the administrative team, we give school board updates, we check in with principals, we keep it front and center to make sure everybody understands that literacy is at the heart of any other goal. And then I just want to end here with some of the highlights of the last couple of years of Tier 1. Again, empowering our teachers, ensuring that all kids have access to grade level standards, that all kids have access to grade level materials, grade level text. So right now we're on cohort 5 of letters. If you want to teach at DC Everest, you have to be trained in letters. That is for all of our 4K, our kindergarten, our first grade, and our second grade teachers. We have had many of our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade teachers trained. We don't know what that looks like next year. That's in discussion. Should 3rd, 4th, and 5th be trained as well? It was very interesting the first year when we had 40 seats purchased. We had some people who were very resistant, PLCs that didn't understand why. And then we had 5th grade teachers fighting for a seat because they understood the why we were doing this. So lots of PD, not just letters, a lot of PD that's aligned to the science of reading and structured literacy is ongoing in our district. We shifted a lot of resources. When I started in this position in 2018, we had 11 Tier 2 interventionists. My question was, why do we want kids to go to Tier 2 intervention if we can help it? Well, let's get it tackled at Tier 1 in the universal classroom. So now we are done, and we had 1 universal literacy coach, K5. We shifted positions. We pulled some of teachers back in the classroom who weren't interested in being coaches. We had very specific expectations for what the coaching should look like. And we ended up with 5 very talented, hardworking individuals who have really done a lot of this work in the trenches. We've gone through the selection process, purchasing, training, and implementation of several evidence-based resources. So right now we utilize, all teachers have to utilize Heggerty. We use Foundations for Phonics. We have a very rigorous word study program. We use geodes, and now we are in full implementation of K7, Wit and Wisdom as our core literacy resource or literacy curricula. iReady is our universal screening tool, and we're using FastBridge for progress monitoring, and I'll have Lisa talk about that in just a little bit. Again, I said that we have a very rich PD program. We vet the PD. Our PD is actually tied to our teacher salary schedule. Some of the PD, if you want to teach that particular grade level or topic, you are required to take it. We vet it all through. If it's not vetted through ias.gov or other well-renowned research or universities or constituents, then we vet it through House before we allow it. And then again, our ongoing practice is to ensure that all K-12 literacy continues to build up. So if I'm going to end up on my section real quickly here, where are we now? We're not perfect. We're ongoing. This is ongoing work. It's super important work. Obviously, the report card, the format has changed a bit in the last couple of years. This is that same school. Now, our new report cards have been released, but they're embargoed, so I can't share that with you, although we're very excited about the results. But I can share with you the prior year's report card. This is during a pandemic, mind you, and this is that same title school, which was, I'm sorry, I can't get that back. They were exceeding expectations. So remember, they went from meeting few expectations We hit a pandemic. We made these changes. They are exceeding expectations. And that's not this past year, that's the year before, right in the middle of the trenches of the pandemic. I do have some iReady data to share with you. This is this last spring. Here you can see now this is really where a student is in proficiency at grade level standards. We want all kids to be in the green. These are the historical national norms of all kids who were tested in iReady right when the pandemic hit. So we're talking about data before pandemic. Here is national in school this past school year. Here is Wisconsin in school this past school year. And here is DC Everest. And you can see we're well above both Wisconsin in school and the national in our progress. Yep, we still have work to do. This is unacceptable. But again, we have to be systematic. This is data that includes our K through 8th grade. We can't get it right at 8th grade if we can't get it right at 2nd grade. So we've been very strategic building up. And again, now this year, our middle school teachers, our middle school ELA students will all have wit and wisdom as their curriculum as well. And then this little graph is another piece of data. This is this past spring. We want everyone to be high performing and high growth in comparison to like schedule or like scoring students across the nation. You can see we'd like to push these even further over, but we've got no one here, no one here, and no one here, minus 8th grade. 8th grade hasn't had a whole lot of the, I want to say the support in terms of, very targeted PD for them, very targeted resources. We've really spent those resources at elementary. So we're very pleased with these scores nonetheless. Again, our goal is to continue to push everybody over to that trajectory. All right, well, that was my section, and I'm very pleased to introduce to you Lisa Braun. She is our RTI coordinator, but a little bit more about Lisa, very rich literacy background. She has been key in the work that I just described along with Julie. Lisa also works directly with all of our interventionists, and she really oversees the interventions that we provide. Lisa.
Thank you very much. I'm going to share just a little bit more with you about our, oh, can you go back one, Kelly? I wonder if you can head back there. Oh, there it is, perfect. Share with you just a little bit about our Tier 1 supports and some of the additional screening that we do to inform instruction in our district. Kelly had mentioned that we utilize iReady as our universal screener. But we know as educators, professionals in this business, that a computerized screener is not going to tell us everything that we need to know about a student. So we, of course, dig deeper into some of the information that we need in order to serve kids well. So that iReady data point is really our starting point in helping us identify risk or areas for growth for our students. We've also leaned on the development of the Wisconsin's informational guidebook on dyslexia and related conditions as a resource for us. There have been a lot of years where people were very afraid to talk about dyslexia or related conditions with reading, but we recognize that there are lots of things happening with a young reader and we need to get to the bottom of those as quickly as we can. So we've leaned on those resources as well. And then we've tried to provide what we can at the Tier 1 level, like Kelly mentioned before, to support our teachers. So the samples that you see on your screen are a couple of things that we've developed over time to help them. I'm sure many of you are familiar with WIN, the What I Need time, or the intervention time in an elementary school day. And we've had that as part of our schedule for about 8 years. But the use of it had been mainly just for interventionists at the Tier 2 and 3 level to pull students, or for our special education managers, case managers to serve students outside of the core time. But we knew we could be a lot more intentional with instruction for our kids. And some of that intentionality has to come from assessing our kids a little bit deeper. So through our letters training, our teachers were much better prepared to try some new assessments using the past, using Heggerty assessments, looking at the letters, phonics, and word reading surveys. All of those pieces have been super helpful in helping our teachers to identify what they could do during their win time that would be a lot more intentional. So we've really moved away from a guided reading group kind of model in our win time to more of strategy groupings during that time. So the sample again that you see on your page is really us trying to help teachers identify what's the next thing I can do with a student as an assessment to figure out a need if I see something that is troublesome in my classroom. This is on one of our Canvas pages where we provide information for teachers. Canvas is our learning management system for kids, but we also put lots of resources in there for teachers. Kelly, you can go to the next slide for me, please. Thanks. So of course, we can have all of that assessment data in front of us, but if we're moving away from things like guided reading groups, teachers wonder, what are we doing with that time then? What can we do with kids that is more in tune with the universal curriculum that we're using when we adopted Foundations specifically? And what can we do that we know is evidence-based? So also inside that Canvas course, we've tried to provide teachers with the things that, like Kelly mentioned before, that we've vetted. We know that they have background behind them that support learners. So teachers can click on those things and find resources that match the needs that kids have inside the classroom. So we're hoping that kids end up with never needing to move to a tier 2 intervention through some of these tier 1 supports. But of course, we know that we are going to have learners that require that. So when we move through that RTI process, through the multi-level system of support, the assessments that the teachers have given are helpful in making some of the decisions about what comes next if a student needs a tier 2 intervention. But one thing that came out of the pandemic that actually has been a bright spot for us too is that our classroom teachers are more involved in tier 2 and 3 interventions now. In previous years, Kelly mentioned we had about 11 interventionists that would do those interventions. We have 4 interventionists at this point, but our classroom teachers are on the ground doing a lot of tier 2 interventions with their students too, which has been really effective because they know that student inside and out as a learner from having them all day. We had to do that during the pandemic because we were lowering our class sizes and trying not to have staff members moving around our building as much with different groups of kids. But we've continued it outside of that just because of that asset that it brings to our students. Kelly, you can go to the next one. So we built that capacity with our classroom teachers to provide some of those tier 2 interventions. And some of the things that they are doing involve things like a Foundations double dose. They're using Heggerty's Bridge the Gap. They're using things like rewards or reading simplified. So we're always looking to provide those resources for them so that there's not a guessing game of what we can do next. They're also working through that progress monitoring process on a weekly basis with FastBridge. We used AimsWeb for the last several years, but have moved to FastBridge this year. And we found a lot of different assessments in there that are especially helpful for students that are already qualified in special ed. We can be a lot more targeted in our progress monitoring in that respect. In our tier 2 and 3 interventions, when we had 3 or 11 interventionists, we had things like reading recovery and leveled literacy intervention. And what we found was that kids seemed to grow during the time that they had them, but that growth was not sustained well over a number of years. And the targets were not discrete enough. So we've really tried to align our intervention menu with the science of reading. We're always looking for things that are direct, focused, lots of opportunities for kids to practice, and lots of corrective feedback inside those interventions. So being as explicit as we can and as systematic. Has to have a well-developed scope and sequence to use it. And the biggest piece for us is that it's more targeted. We're not trying to do everything in 30 minutes. If it's an intervention that needs to focus on decoding, that's what we're focusing on. So some of the things that we have since gone to include an Orton-Gillingham approach. We've trained our interventionists in that. We've worked with SPIRE, things like Road to the Code, Road to Reading, Just Words. Those are just a few of the things that we've aligned to or added to our intervention menu through that alignment process. And then, like I mentioned before, progress monitoring and data collection, that you'd think that as interventionists, you'd be very in tune with that all of the time, but we really weren't when we started through this process. It was more like oh, it feels like we're growing. Now we're really focused on what is that data telling us? What is the monitoring data showing us about that student's growth? And if it's not working, what are we doing to change it? So with that, at the tier 2 and 3 level, we of course will have some students that do need to go through a special education evaluation and work with some of our special education case managers that Julie oversees. So I'll turn it over to Julie.
Thank you. I am having really touchy internet. So if I start to go out, just someone text me, Lisa, Kelly, let me know. Yeah, so special ed, we've been super excited in the special ed world to be so collaborative with our regular ed partners. It is definitely one of our areas of growth that I'm most proud of over the last 5 years. No longer is it, this conversation of, oh, they're special ed, you figure it out. It's all students really are everybody's students at DC Everest. And that's been a nice welcome change. So we started having all of our early childhood and elementary special ed teachers trained in letters as well, along with their gen ed partners. We've had a few teachers go through the Orton-Gillingham training. Our special ed coach has gone through the Orton-Gillingham training. One of our biggest things that we've been pushing in the last few years is Wilson. So over the course of special ed at DC Everest, we would have an intervention, but it wouldn't be different than what was happening in regular ed. So let's say a student would go through the RTI process, go to referral, and let's say they were using SPIRE, like Lisa, like she referenced. Well, special ed would just use SPIRE. Well, if it wasn't working, why are we continuing to do it, correct? So we've been really intentional in looking at interventions that are more specialized and different. So we're very proud that I have 5 elementary education teachers that are level 1 certified. I have one more being level 1 certified this year. Those of you that are trained in Wilson know what a feat that is. And the amount of work that's involved in that. So I'm pretty pleased. We have one at every elementary building. One special ed teacher. We learned about EBLI this summer. So I also have that same group, EBLI. I think I must have glitched out. We have the same level 1 Wilson certified teachers going through EBLI this year, as well as one secondary special ed teacher going through EBLI. One of the things we learned about in the training that a group of our teachers went to this summer was that EBLI has strong connections for a co-taught classroom at the secondary level, specifically for our students that might be reading at that 2nd or 3rd grade level in 8th, 9th, and 10th grade. So I have one at every level going. I'm going to be reporting back. They're putting it in practice in their co-taught classes this school year, in the hopes that we find that the data is showing good success, and we're going to have more teachers trained in EBLI next year. We are very much a district of co-teaching at the secondary. We have started bringing co-teaching into our elementary classrooms when appropriate. Again, one of COVID, the benefits of COVID. So in the past, we used to have an LD specialist that was K5, and then we'd have an EBD teacher K5, and we would have an ID teacher K5. But during COVID, we were cohorting. So we have a K2 teacher, or a K1, a 2, 3, and a 4, 5, which just opens up the opportunity for more collaboration with classroom teachers to be able to go in, and let's say we are using EBLI, and we can bring that into a wit and wisdom lesson and support our students in that rich, core instruction. We are always growing in our data collection. Lisa kind of talked a little bit about progress monitoring. This year, a bigger focus on our progress monitoring and reviewing of the data. I would say in the past, special ed teachers would progress monitor according to what our IEPs said they would do. And it was just kind of a, let's check off my box. And I did what I was supposed to do, but we never went back and reviewed that data to see if what we were doing was working. And if it wasn't working and our trend lines were kind of stagnant, we didn't change up our intervention. We didn't change up what we were doing. So that's one of our tasks this year. And I think I have it down there: when you know better, you do better. And that's kind of where we're at in special ed. I would say the changes, though, overall over the past 5 years is really that change in the mindset that all students are everybody's students. And just because they're a student with a disability and maybe have a literacy, need in the classroom, it doesn't mean that, special ed's going to be solely responsible for that student. It's more of a collaboration, but again, ensuring that our special ed staff have the same resources and PD and training as our gen ed teachers, and then that same coaching support, just because, you need someone to talk it through and work with the experts. So Lisa has been a huge help in that. I really feel like her role helps bridge those gaps for us in the regular ed and special ed world. So we're continuing to build capacity of all of our teachers and continuing to grow in our knowledge and our service for our students.
Mm-hmm. And thanks, Julie. And I would also echo that as director of EL, we're following the same path as special ed, where the old model was pull out. Well, how can you learn a language if you're constantly pulled out? The idea that we purchase all of those same, all of the EL teachers will have the grade levels that they cover for the Wit and Wisdom teacher modules. So just making sure that they understand that it's not something different, it's supporting that rich access to the core.
Uh-oh.
Sorry about that. I guess somehow I muted myself. So what's next is the idea that this work is ongoing. Our data shows us we still have a long ways to go. What I think makes us kind of catch our breath right now, we're trying to do all this during COVID, which we have some really great growth despite COVID. That, I showed you that Title I building that pre-COVID was meeting few expectations and now is exceeding expectations as of not this report card, but the last following year before. It's really the idea that we have to move all students, and all students deserve to be literate, because you can't succeed as this audience. I'm preaching to the choir. Literacy is at the heart of everything. So we continue to pay attention to what all the data say that drives what we do. And kind of a side benefit is our processes have really become the roadmap for continuous improvement in our other subject areas. We are following the same format for improving our math outcomes for our students right now. So that's where we're at. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to again thank anybody who's here listening, and especially thank Donna for having us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Kelly and Lisa and Julie. If you can stay on, I have a meeting at 2, but if anyone wants to stay on and ask questions, I hope you can stay on and ask and answer questions.
Sure.
If anyone has any, just unmute yourself and ask a question. I have a whole list of them. If no one else has them.
I have a question. You referred to your word study program. Is that something you guys created in district?
So we started with Words Their Way, but we're switching it up now. Lisa, what is the, I forget, I was just with Jackie yesterday. What is the resource we're using for that?
She did some research of Greek, Latin roots, word study, prefixes, suffixes, things like that. She put together some research, I think, related to a variety of resources and the scope and sequence that they teach them in, and has pulled that information in order to develop resources for teachers, I believe. I don't think it's not one specific program, because we're trying to weave it in wisdom vocabulary work and supplement that a little bit to make the connections stronger. But I believe that Jackie, one of our coaches, is weaving in instruction in the commonly used root words, prefixes, suffixes, etc.
So
Does that help?
That's what
Definitely morphology based when we hit grades 4 and 5, because our K through 3 is foundations.
I think I want to say the book is called The Book of Morphemes or something to that effect. I can't remember the title offhand.
Okay.
Is it the William Van Cleve resource?
I could be. I would have to see the cover
like
right
it might
now.
be. Yeah. Any other questions, Annie?
I was
That was
wondering,
it. I just love word study programs, and I've kind of made one. Sounds similar, but I was just wondering what you guys use for a resource. So that's great.
Okay. Any other questions?
I was wondering if you'd be willing to share your 5-year literacy plan. I'm
I
just
will.
starting that process right now.
Yeah, for sure. And in fact, what I'll do is I'll just send I think we have it linked on it probably needs to be updated, but it was linked on our homepage, but I'll just send it to Donna. I know she sends the recordings out, so I'll get in that.
Perfect.
Thank you.
I have a question. You talked about some resistance, and which is not unusual, but how about administrative training? What did you do for your administrators to get them on board and get them up to speed on to what the science looks like and what they should expect from their teachers?
So what we did first was it was really, and that was the hardest part of it, I want to say, was getting all the leaders on board first to see the urgency and the importance. And so it really was a lot of the body of data that exists right now that you see, when you see all the presentations at some of the Reading League in the early years, we used a lot of those resources. We also asked them to come to letters training. So even though they didn't go through the training per se, they had books, they had accounts, they were expected to be alongside. They have to meet weekly with their coaches in their buildings. They each have a coach, a literacy coach. Those literacy coaches have kind of the guides of what we expect to see, almost to the point of this is what you should see. We're to the point right now where it's interesting that, and then, like I said, our data is embargoed right now, but they have become very competitive with one another, even though 2 of those buildings are full title. It's competitive. They understand the data and they understand they have to move it. They do a lot of visits to PLCs with their coaches alongside of them. Their coaches keep them abreast on which PLCs might be struggling, need extra help, need extra supports. In fact, they just came to our last elementary principal meeting just last week and said for some of these individuals, these PLCs that are struggling with wit and wisdom, can we get them some structured release time where they're working with their coaches, where we're checking in on them to ensure that they feel supported, that they're moving ahead with it. That's been a work in progress. I feel like we're in a super good place. I know we're in a really good place with the principals. I check in with them every month. Lisa checks in with them. Julie checks in with them on another schedule. where they know that I'm coming. In fact, I've got one this afternoon that was rescheduled, and I don't want to reschedule it for a Friday afternoon, but she wants that time to talk about, her next steps. It's just become how we breathe, speak here, that it's, and they know that we expect them to be instructional leaders, that we can't do it without them. So even to the point where, we're talking about, can we get them some relief with teachers in charge for behaviors so that they can focus more on the instructional component of the job. I don't know if that answered your question, but okay.
Yeah, because we know that if it's only a bottom-up movement, it's going to fail, because you need to have a top-down, bottom-up, and everyone needs to understand the, what the science is. Another question: how often do you have data meetings at a building level or grade level? Grade level.
I'm going to let Lisa, you can speak to that one as our data coordinator.
Sure. So our data meetings, after we do our universal screening in fall, we're having data meetings across buildings at PLC levels, especially. So grade levels get together to discuss all of the data for the screening and to identify what else do we need to do offline in order to get more information about these kids, sort of like I described before. So for example, that would have happened like 2.5 weeks ago. Let's say in one of our buildings at Evergreen, the principal, the literacy coach, they would have gone to every single PLC, gone over all of that data, looked at kids' names, looked at the needs that they all have, and then they would have tried to identify how they could break out different groupings for their win time. So that's one very specific way they're doing that after every screening window. So after fall, after winter, and then shortly before the school year ends, just to make sure that we're ready for the fall when it hits the next year. We're also then doing our intervention overview meetings or review meetings. We always do those at least halfway through an intervention formally. So if we have a 12-week intervention, the whole problem solving team comes together at least halfway through that intervention. It's happening more frequently than that with the interventionist and the classroom teacher to talk about that student data, but the whole team will come together at least halfway through and then towards the end. Does that answer?
Yeah, I thought it would be more often, but I mean, some schools do it weekly.
Well, they work in their PLCs, of course, on a weekly basis, because we have embedded PLC time. So a grade level at any one building is meeting multiple times a week. So they will go over all of their universal data as well. What's happening in Wit and Wisdom? Are there certain targets that kids aren't meeting that we need to address? They're doing those kinds of things authentically through their PLC meetings too.
Sure. Which makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. So are you willing to share what you used to use in your district?
Absolutely. We used units of study, Lucy Calcutt's. And incidentally, it's interesting that when I came into this position, they were just finishing the required, everyone has to be on board. So it was a quick for some people. It was, unfortunately, when you expect people to continually take a new curriculum on, it was unfortunate that some people were just getting into implementation with that.
Sure.
But again, when you know better, you have to do better. And if you know that it's not benefiting students, and in fact, what we're providing for our teachers is, in all intents, not pushing kids to be college, career, workplace ready, then it's our responsibility to move it in a way that it was manageable for teachers. So that being said, would I have liked to have moved more quickly into Wit and Wisdom? Absolutely. But, we had to use that implementation science where we didn't want to sabotage ourselves and have people just say, well, I'm going to sabotage it, I'm not doing it. We really went slowly to go fast. And I know that's cliche, but we had the people who were on board, who understood. They went with it. We had some during the pandemic. We had some of our Title I schools. One of our Title I schools, the entire school took it that first year and just went with it. They got through, 3 full of the 4 modules.
Mhm.
So it was pretty impressive. We had a lot of momentum because we had a lot of teachers who they knew that they were seeing their kids that this isn't the best thing for our kids.
Right.
And so they were, regardless of the work that was involved on their side of things, they embraced it.
Yeah.
We're really grateful to those teachers, let me tell you.
I know, and that's exactly what has to happen. You have to have your literacy leaders at grade levels to make things work. And, when they get it, or, they come to school with the knowledge that they picked up, on social media or wherever they picked it up. Right?
Right.
For that. It does make a difference. One last question from me. Maybe there's others. You mentioned letters training. When Mississippi did letters training, their letters training was implemented, but they also had high quality trained coaches that made that made the implementation of letters more effective. Because your coaches were kind of like new at this, was it difficult for them to, first of all, buy in, second of all, to be able to coach using all this new language and new expectations and, new things? What was that process like?
Well, I'll give my 2 cents, but then I want Lisa or Julie to give theirs. So they did the training right alongside with their cohorts, but like I said, our group of coaches, we couldn't ask for a more equipped, the mindset of them. Once we had them on board and they understood the why behind it, they were our champions to work with the teachers to kind of keep, pushing it in a nice way because, they're not administrators and they're respected by their peers. And so we really looked to them. We actually had assigned them. They each had for every year we had letters, we had a coach that was assigned a cohort of their teachers. So they would sit right alongside of them. Now this year, we're in year 5. So even though they don't go to the trainings, they still are checking in with those new teachers who are required to go through the training. So I think we were lucky to have them. Lisa, what am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, I can see the benefit of them having had that training prior to ours. I think that would have been interesting. But I also think that the fact that they were going through it with our teachers allowed for some really authentic conversations to happen that our teachers may not have engaged in if they felt like somebody was ahead of them, or they felt like they were.
That's true.
Yeah. So I think they just, it was comfortable. It was nice to have them doing that together and experience the same thing. Because like I said, the conversations were really good, and the things that they grappled with then, they grappled with together. They went through it together. They weren't in different spots at that point.
They were almost on the same playing field, so that made
Totally
the teachers felt safe.
There's a lot of respect in that. Yeah,
right, for sure. I'm really excited to see the growth that Everest has gone through. It's just, as a former employee there, and I know, Julie, I pushed for this, a long
We
time
had lots
ago.
of lunch conversations, didn't we,
Yes,
Donna?
we did. Our rooms were right next to each other, and I felt that was really the missing piece. And, it was so evident when you get those high schoolers who are struggling readers, and there's no real need for that. We can fix the problem. So it's really exciting to see Everest is on this path, on this journey. So anyone else have any questions?
I have a few questions myself here. I am a universal coach for the elementary buildings in my district. And one of my questions is, how long have you used iReady as the universal screener? And the reason I'm asking is our district uses NWEA from kindergarten through high school. And so I'm interested in the iReady universal screener.
Oh gosh. Okay. So we've used iReady since, is this our 3rd year at elementary? Yes, this is our 3rd year at elementary. And so K through 5, and our 2nd year at our secondaries 6 through 8. We piloted it with a smaller group of K through 5 teachers the year before we brought it on fully at our elementary. So, and we were STAR prior. So we've always been used to a computerized screener that was like that. We were not used to a standards-based screener though, like iReady. So the data was rather alarming for our teachers when they first looked at it. Because you can be at a high percentile rank and still not have mastery of a lot of the standards in comparison to what that criterion is. So that was a little alarming, but a really good move for us.
The other question I have too is we have full implementation of foundations in Wilson in our district, and we also use Just Words at the 4th grade level. However, we are getting ready to adopt a new reading series. So we are investigating this year, next year, and then being ready to adopt the year after. And so Wit and Wisdom is something that we are looking into just because we're so heavy into foundations at the universal level. Double dose foundations is one of our tier 2. And so I guess I want to know when your district chose Wit and Wisdom, was it because that was the best you believed? Or was it where there were a couple of options and for some reason you chose one over the other? I mean, just to help kind of direct everything that I've read is pushing us toward Wit and Wisdom, but I also have to convince my administration too, so.
We had a committee. So we actually, Lisa and I vetted 3 resources. They had to be highly rated on What Works, Clearinghouse, IES.gov, EdWorks. We had our, our structured literacy rubric that we were borrowing from some of those types of organizations. We had our coaches and that group of teachers add additional criteria that they were looking for. Some of it was very specific to the teacher, like ease of implementation, time. We let them create part of the rubric. And then we had that group each on their own, the coaches included. They vetted each resource. It took us that second year. They vetted the resources. We kept coming back. We discussed. And in the end, we went by points on the rubric. And the points on the rubric said Wit and Wisdom. But it was kind of in our favor because we had already adopted geodes and foundations. So, that just, it made it easier. I will say this about Wit and Wisdom. So we have department chairs across our district, and we have very heavy department chairs. So we have the coaches in K-5, and we have the department chairs in 6-12 in all subject areas. The social studies 6-12 team, they're giddy about Wit and Wisdom. I've given them all the teacher tip sheets. They've seen the geodes, and we've been waiting for this. We've been waiting for kids to come to us with that background knowledge, with that rich content. So it's something where, people are starting to see beyond those who teach literacy that, this is something that overlaps in everything. So again, we just can't wait to start to see the next couple of years down the road how having kids that go through 4K through 5, have gone through all of these changes that we've made and we're asking our teachers to do. What's going to happen when they go into 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade? And so we know we still have work to do at the secondary level, and that's not ever going to go away. And there's so many variables, as you know, to be a secondary student. But gosh, if we can make it universal, that it doesn't matter if you go to school A, school B, have teachers C or teacher D, you're going to get a super rich experience at DC Everest. That's what we're working towards. And I don't know, that was just a plug for Wit and Wisdom.
It was very good and helpful. And just to clarify, is the writing also through Wit and Wisdom?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Very good.
And we have had some, so we came from this writing workshop model. I've got to be very, we only have to teach for 10 minutes. Then, our kids are going to go and they're going to write for how many minutes, whatever. And now people are like, wow, I'm explicitly instructing this, and they're not writing a lot right away, and then people are starting to see, but no, you're teaching them the standards of syntax. You're teaching, you are explicitly teaching them how to become advanced writers. They're not just writing for the sake of writing. It's very systematic. I think that was our biggest struggle with some of the teachers who really loved that old workshop model. It's not to say Wit and Wisdom doesn't have workshop. It does. It just looks differently because you're explicitly ensuring that they have all of those skills and they're building upon those discrete skills to make the bigger picture.
The other question I would have is with Wit and Wisdom and then with geodes, do teachers in the classroom find that it's just too many options when looking at, we are going to work on reading, or we're going to reread this, or pulling for skill work? Are there too many book choices because you have geodes and the wit and wisdom?
Lisa, go for it.
Oh, I've never heard anyone say that there's too many options. Nope. I think that that connection between the foundations curriculum and wit and wisdom that geodes brings in is like that critical bridge that teachers really have bought into. They love the geodes texts. And I think a big part of that is the fact that they're really accessible by all kids. They're beautifully written, they're beautifully illustrated, but the connection and bridge that that provides is huge for them. And when you move away from guided reading, the first thing you hear is, well, when are the kids reading books? When are they going to read books? They're not reading books during wit and wisdom necessarily by themselves.
Mhm.
But when they look at those geodes books, and you can really raise kids up with those, whether they're strong decoders or not, that provides that very authentic bridge. So I haven't heard anyone say it's too much.
All right, I apologize, but I have to cut this beautiful, wonderful conversation off. And, maybe we need to continue this on another lunch and learn, I should
Would
say.
love it.
All right.
We
Yeah,
feel passionate. Yeah.
we
feel
could, we
passionate
really
about this
could. We
stuff.
could do something independent. Oh, I got a thumbs up. All right. All right, ladies. Thank you. From the bottom
Thanks,
of my
everybody.
heart, very nice to see all of you and all the work you're doing. All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Mhm.